Hello, basketball world. My name is Dimitri, and it's Three Better Than Two podcast. Today, we got Coach Dylan Sells helping out as a co-host, and we got Jordan Johnson. Hey, how you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. Tell us about your background because you grew up in Texas, right? And then you play football and basketball. How did it happen that you end up falling in love in basketball? Tell us about that.
So I didn't really start playing basketball until seventh grade, and that was just I made the B team on basketball, and it was kind of just for fun. And then I ended up switching schools from Cedar Park High School to Brentwood Christian School. So I went from a let's say 900 to 1,000 kid middle school to like a 650 kid K through 12 private school, and they didn't have football when I went there, and so thank you. And so one time I went there. I was like, okay, maybe I'll focus on basketball, and I made varsity my freshman year. And
nice.
I kind of just started falling in love with it. I had a really good coach in Brian Thrift, and he helped me, just develop from basic skills and techniques, and he taught me how important little things were, and so kind of just found that love and joy. And obviously, when you're competing in games and you start looking at stats and you start looking at impact in winning and losing, you kind of start, finding that joy and fun and, love of the game. So,
that's pretty good. What helped you kind of overlap with the football and basketball? Are there anything in common, or what's the difference?
So for me, I think explosiveness was the biggest thing that translated most. So we did, hand cleans, power cleans, squats, bench, lunges, a lot of
just lifting helped a lot.
Yeah, I just did everything. I was a quarterback in football, so it taught me leadership skills. It taught me how to read the field. It taught me how to anticipate, windows, like tight window throws. I was a running quarterback, so I got to figure out how to, use agility and acceleration. Maybe I go towards the sideline, then I make a cut inside. And so it helped me with that footwork stuff. But football definitely was a fun sport. I only played 2 years in high school because my school didn't have it. And then we got it my junior year, and we started off with 6-man football. So for all you people that don't know what 6-man is, just look up 6-man football. It looks like it's basketball on turf. It's kind of funny.
Is it the same field, same size?
So it's 80 yards wide. No, 80 yards length and 40 or 38 yards wide. So
are there any different fields, or it's a regular field? It just kind of lined it up.
Yeah, they just lined it up. So like the end zone was maybe before, it was like 10 yards before the actual 100-yard end zone, and then the back of the end zone was the start of the 100-yard field end zone. It was interesting.
Yeah.
The rules are different. Like you had a hand off before you could run as a quarterback. So if you just like snapped the ball, you couldn't run instantly. So like it was interesting.
Some certain rules.
Yeah.
Got you. Tell us how you end up from all the way to Texas to Judson University and then Chicagoland.
So Coach Thrift ended up getting a job at Judson after my junior season. And I cried when he told me. I was really upset. Yeah. And then so he got that job, and then maybe 6 months later, he texted me like, hey, you like Chicago? And I was like, oh, this guy's recruiting me, how cool. He was probably the one only coach that recruited me out of high school. I was pretty low key. I didn't really know even how high school recruitment works. So I was just playing for the love of the game, honestly. Like I wasn't worried about coaches, college, anything. I was just playing for fun. And so I wanted to go to a school in Arkansas. It was a D2. I tried out, and obviously they went a different direction. So then I ended up texting Coach Thrift back in the May after I graduated if there was a spot for me. And so again, not knowing how college basketball worked, he was like, okay, let me check something real quick. Texting me back like 10 minutes later, like, kind of like playing it cool. Like, oh yeah, we got a spot for you.
He was checking availability.
Yeah, for sure. Because in NAI, they recruit all the way up until August and even September. So yeah, so he ended up getting me there, and the rest is kind of history.
That's interesting. Yeah, and then I have a story that because I knew some coaches and players in that league, so I would go at Judson when Titus was there, and then John Kirpley and Ambrose, and then Trinity. So I would go to a lot of Judson games, and I was like, man, who's this guy? Like he's small guard just rebound over the rim, so I was always like, I really like your game, and then eventually you end up after the COVID in the gym, and then the rest is a history, and then you start coaching.
You said I was fat.
That's true. That's that was.
He's like, man, this guy put on a lot of weight.
He did. He was like, that's Jordan? It's the same guy?
Yeah, I didn't recognize you at first, but that helped you.
Yeah,
maybe tell how it helped you.
Yeah. So, I'm big on accountability. And so obviously we didn't know each other,
Right.
but you see me play once and I went and helped you out. I played like a neutral team. And on my team where I had DJ, I had Modest, I had Rokas, and somebody else. And so it was 5-on-5. We played a full, I think it was like 20-minute half.
I think Lucas, their brother, played too.
Yes, he did. Yeah. So I had that whole Castillo family.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the game, I actually played terrible. And you were just like, yo, you need to lose some weight. And I was like, you're right. I do need to lose some weight. And so then I ended up losing like 15, 20 pounds between October and the first game of the season, November. And, I had my best season ever. I averaged like 18 a game. I shot well from everywhere. I was playing really confident. I was able to play 40 minutes. Like it was, I felt really good about myself, And so like, I feel like your accountability, even not knowing me, just kind of being blunt about it, was really helpful.
Right. Tell me about, I really love your relationship with players and how you connect with players and on all levels, like I actually envy because sometimes players would go to you to ask some questions about basketball, versus going to me, let's say, right, if I'm coaching them. So I feel like with that, you're doing a really good job. And tell us, how do you, with a good relationship, still have accountability? And how do you keep players accountable, especially nowadays with all going on, if they will try to find people who tell them how great they are?
It's hard, honestly, because being young, kids are honestly able to talk to you like they would talk to their own friends.
Right.
And so I have to balance that, and sometimes I have to walk away. Sometimes I have to say, we can't talk about this or tell it like it is, but right. I don't think, you can really reach a player without building a relationship with them first. That's something I've learned. Actually, my first day at Full Package, you said go find 2 or 3 guys to help out, and that's how you can start building a relationship. And I didn't know what that meant at first, and I think a lot of new coaches, struggle with what you're asking to do. But when you realize, like, you can get the best out of somebody by building that relationship first, because they'll play harder for you. Yeah. They'll do things that honestly they probably don't even think they know how to do or want to do or reach a level that mentally they haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, there's one thing that you do like better than all Full Package coaches is when we go to training at the warehouse, like you intentionally introduce yourself and get every single person's name. And a lot of Full Package coaches talk about it or tell the kids to do it, but not every coach actually goes up. And like when you go to training at the warehouse, it's always like high energy. Every kid loves you. And it's just super great to see like your growth from being a college athlete to learning under Meach to like kind of like taking this into your own coaching realm now.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think when I was a kid, I would go and find 5 or 10 people at my church to dap up that were like older. Mm-hmm. And it was only because they dapped up really cool. And I was like, I'm gonna go find that guy, but it made me feel really good. Right. So right. I know that for, an 8-year-old, boy or girl that's new to Full Package and is shy, like that one coach that, makes them feel a little bit better about themselves and more welcome, their experience will be better.
Right. I agree with you that a lot of coaches overwhelmed, especially in Full Package practices when it's fast paced, a lot of people, big gym. Right. So I'm sure the first few days you're like, hey, what's going on here? Right. It's nothing like it. So then like that helps. And I still have that advice to new coaches, like just build a relationship with few people first, like introduce yourself, find out something. How do they learn, and then slowly you're going to grow into it and it'll be more natural, like for you now, to just control the room when the new players come. It's easy for you,
Right,
so
right.
That's pretty good advice too. Tell me this. We always ask guests, what cartoon, book, TV character is most like you and why? To just kind of understand you better.
I have 2. So like, let's say cartoon, it'd be a Sheen from Jimmy Neutron, because so like for me, I'm not smart in every aspect of life. Like I don't, go and do crazy research and try to just be the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I'm smart with a few things. And so Sheen was not the brightest kid in the room, but he knew everything about Ultra Lord. And so he was a goofy kid, carefree, and, liked what he liked. And he had a free spirit, and so I thought that was cool. And then another one of my favorite TV shows is Family Matters. And so I see myself as both Steve Urkel and Stefan Urkel. So Steve Urkel was a nerdy kid.
Mm-hmm.
He was super smart. Nobody really appreciated what he did for others. He was very, selfless
Mm-hmm.
for other people. Like he would fix whatever. He had like this love of his life since he was like 10. But then later in the seasons, it was like a 9-season sitcom. A new character came, and it was the same actor, but it was a different character, Stefan Urkel.
Sure.
So he was cool, had all these nice clothes, but it was still the same character. It was just a different persona, right? And so I think that's me, because I feel like a lot of people have overlooked me as far as like, as a kid, I was a B team. One kid told me that I shouldn't even made the basketball team, but they added like a few guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, it takes time to understand like who I am as a person, like from someone else's perspective. And I think it just, I've always been if you like me, you like me, if you know what I bring to the table, that's great. But if not, like, it's okay too. I'm gonna still be my same
Like you
person.
didn't care much about other people's opinions.
No, I tried not to, at least.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. What is your mission now? Like, what are you trying to do with basketball, and what is it?
Definitely be a high school coach. I think the coaches that I've had, I've just appreciated so much. I think I build best relationships with high schoolers because they're in that middle ground of wanting to learn, but also striving to be a college athlete too. It is a challenge nowadays just because of transfer portal, pressure from parents, college coaches, stuff like that. So, I want to like help, those along that journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, being a high school coach is definitely the next step for me.
Tell me, let's say it's the first day of your job. What do you do?
Definitely introduce myself to all players.
So you would have a player meeting?
Yeah, probably. Or like maybe like an introductory with players and parents, and maybe even get a workout into that same day if we could. Just kind of get everyone a feel for them. Everyone gets a feel for me, stuff like that.
Yeah. Give a few things that are important for a successful high school program.
So number one, you have to establish culture. And so with culture is like, who are you as a coach?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you stand by? What are you going to let slide and what are you not? There's some things that you're going to have to, like some players are different. They come from different backgrounds, but you have to establish a culture. I think two is, strive for organization. So like for me, I'm not super organized as far as like putting stuff in Excel spreadsheet, keeping a planner, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting better at it, but
yeah,
I'm not like, every day,
right.
just very studious.
Right,
and so, right. But like, I would strive for that. So then I think that's important because it helps your team be organized too. And then third, just lead by example. So I think, you talk about relationships, I would strive for the players that, there's always cliques in a team. I would strive for it just to be one click. So it's everybody is friends with everybody because that's how that journey, it becomes more special that way.
Yeah, it was kind of like us at Carmel, like when you talk about lead by example, when we were all getting there so early and we'd all go lift together. Well, then the players don't have no excuses to not work hard because they see their coaches in the gym. I think that's like a great example to continue on in the high school realm is just do stuff that you're going to ask your teammates or your players to do and like show them that you guys are willing to do it too.
Right.
Would you hire somebody who have a better organized skills, or would you really just kind of crunch it down and try to learn it?
I would hire someone for sure. At least, Steve always talks about hiring someone who's like older.
Yeah.
So it just kind of gives a way different voice. I would love to hire just you guys wherever I went, but I know that's That's probably a far-fetched goal, but I just
you never know.
That's like the best start I could have asked for. Like come out of college, had a job at Full Package, go straight to Carmel, and just be involved. That was really special.
Yeah. No, we recently just today talking about how, I'm just coaching for a few months, and then that was our introduction, and that was good. I never put it together until you said it loud, and I was like, yeah, Jordan doesn't have experience, but he's been around for so long, for so many games already. I mean, it was a spring and summer, right? Technically.
Yeah. Spring
and
and
that's how many games? Like 200, 300 games
Mm-hmm.
that you were a part of. You coached. You didn't coach in the beginning, but then you got chance to do it, and then by summer you were doing a great job, on your own. So again, people don't understand how much experience it is like this, because you can be a part of multiple teams, multiple levels. You get so many reps as a coach, and then the fall came and you coach fall too. So then again, it's just a lot of games. But I did not realize until you said it loud that like, oh yeah, he didn't do it. But it was a fun experience. And then I was assisting you in your sophomore team, so that was fun, and it helped like build relationship different way, where a head coach in a high school just kind of oversees it. I was there with you and with them. So the next year they came, right? I already had relationship as a coach, as assistant. So it helped out moving the program together. What do you think about feeder for school? I feel like that's a big thing. And how do you do it?
So when I was in Texas, feeder wasn't a thing. Like it was middle school basketball and it was high school basketball. So it was, you had your coaches, you had your, set plays, whatever. So when I came here and, feeder was a thing, I was like, okay, this is, different form of middle school basketball, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's way more important because, we talk about when you build, a team for, their senior year, it really starts 8th grade, 7th grade, because you can put in so many plays, you can put in so many actions. Everybody knows each other's tendencies. So then you build 6 years of that.
Yeah.
By the time they're seniors, it's pretty special. So, for example, I was at St. Vitus this past year, and I think 5 of those guys played on the same feeder team, or at least the same freshman team.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they went all the way to the senior year. So there's one kid named Jalen Shalheka. He was a football guy, but he was a freshman B teamer. And, most freshman B team players don't really make it to, senior year varsity.
They get waved down a little bit.
Yeah, they do, or they give up on it. So he actually, kept playing every year, and Coach Mike O'Keefe was really hard on him and, pushed him and probably said some things that were, I was like, dang. But by senior year, he was one of our best defenders, and there was no reason that he shouldn't play or start some games. And so, how I would build feeder first is obviously you got to get teams and tryouts, but then it's also like the mixture of individual practices and then group practices too. So those 3rd graders can see what's going on with 6th grade, and the 8th graders can learn how to be leaders and mentors and stuff too. Finding gyms and practices is tough too, and so you have to manage that. But feeder is really important to what you want for your high school program.
Because think about it, the first year you actually coach some games, right?
Yeah.
And I was at the games a lot, and then we sub for practice sometimes. So again, guys like Emmanuel, he was in a feeder for 2 years before he even got in. So then we already knew him in that class, right? So we knew that class, we knew what they need to work on. And then that just helps, I think, build, just continue growing the program and get it. And in private school, it's a little harder. I feel like in public school, they're already in the community. So you just really just kind of get started early, Well, tell me about this season, since you mentioned Viter. How was it? You were a part of the coaching staff, and they had one of the best seasons in their school history. Tell me about that. Tell me about winning program, and what did you learn?
So let's say to start the season, I started in June. I came to a couple practices, and they had music going. It just seemed like everybody wanted to be there. when the practice ended, guys stayed for 45, 50 minutes after, just shooting free throws, just talking. Like the community part of it was there. And I knew right away that the group was going to be special. Just I don't know how many games we were going to win, but I knew that we were going to compete every game. And so going into the season in the fall, in the, I guess, winter, we got off to a pretty good start. And then we ended up beating Stevenson, which I felt like was our biggest win, against, some high-level players.
Right.
And, we didn't have a guy over 6'3", really in that rotation. And so, gang rebounding, pressure on the ball, ball movement on offense were just one of our biggest, keys to our success.
Yeah.
I learned, one, how well organized Mike was. Like he had meetings planned, he had film planned, he always had a practice plan. And so we knew what to expect every day, so then we got in such a good routine that, we were always going hard in practice, and then going to the games. Like we wouldn't have a fast start on offense, but defensively we'd hold a lot of teams under 10 points, and that kind of set the tone most games. Right. And, obviously we went 500 in conference, which our goal was, our goal was a little bit, we wanted to beat St. Pat's or Marian Catholic or Bennett, and fell short. I think we lost 2 by 6 and 1 by 3. And, so, but we still, I felt like we hit our goals. Our goal was to win 20 games. We finished 24-10 and won a regional.
Pretty good.
And, I learned, how to be creative on defense. And then I learned how well misdirection worked on offense, and, and honestly building a relationship with players, because you could tell that Mike put a lot of not just time, but his heart into those players.
Yeah. One thing I really saw, I watched 3 of your guys' games, in your creativity on defense, being a smaller team, you do a lot of different things at a lot of different teams. What went into that thought process, and what did you learn through all the stuff that you threw in?
So this wizard, I call him Gary Wolf, he's been coaching for 40
he's
plus
old
years.
Guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he always has loose leaf notebook paper and just scribbles. But he's always showing me, he's like, yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to double the post off of this player. I tell the guys that if they feel like they can trap in a corner, just go trap. So it's he gave players so much freedom, and it was between IQ on defense and game plan that we just frustrated a lot of teams, and I even told some teams that had size over us, I was like, you're not just going to be able to post us up. You're going to have to be creative before the games, because it's not just a post up. We fronted the post, we had backside help, and guys trusted their help. And I think that's, what defense is mostly about. Can you pressure the ball to where the guys behind you, they got your help, and you don't even have to worry, And so we had that. So anytime someone got beat, they had somebody behind them 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, the first game I went to, I think it was against Antioch at Vider, and you guys knew you weren't going to win the jump, so you immediately trapped off the tip the guy that was jumping, and your next closest person just went and trapped right away. And I was like, I've never even seen this besides when Nate Robinson fake jumped and when we got the ball,
ran through,
and they got that violation, but they're trapping the jump ball right from the start, setting the tone. And it was okay, here we go. They're going to guard the whole time.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. What was your role? When you came in, did you know it right away? Did it kind of, you slowly picked it up, or you saw the gap and filled it in? What was your role, and maybe it grew? So tell us about that.
It was that. So I would say I was part player development. So I did some shooting drills and ball handling stuff. So that was nice. And then it was also player relations. So if Mike was coaching, he would sometimes, hey, can you go talk to them, see if they're okay? And so I try to manage that, because again, a head coach can't worry about everybody's problems through a practice or a game. So I did a lot of that. And then I helped with game planning on defense, especially outside of practice. It would always be, a group text or text between me and Gary or me and Mike. What should we do? And so I did a lot of film. I did a lot of player relations, a lot of player development. So I kind of just found my way. Again, it starts with building relationships. the players brought me in pretty early because I'd seen some of them just at Carmel or at AAU tournaments. And so they honestly welcomed me with open arms right away. So that made it a lot easier to coach hard, you know.
Yeah.
And with high school kids there.
It's hard not to like you, so.
For real.
You know, with high school kids though, like they have their bad days. So like try to manage that too. And hey, stay on the course, you know. There's one kid named Jack Leonard. He's a sophomore and he was expected to play a lot more than what he did. So towards the end of the season, he kind of fell out of rotation, but he was doing so well in practice. Like one day I was like, hey, you're doing great. Stay the course. You know, I think your time will come, you know, and I didn't know how the rotation was going to work out in the playoffs, but he ended up being like one of our main pieces off the bench. Like he had 10 points first game and then he had 6 and played big minutes when Henry got hurt.
Right.
And so like his number was called and he was ready. And I felt like, you know, he was a great example of staying like that course through a long season.
He could have full out and then you never know. Udonis Haslem said it really good. Like you're one coach, one injury, one situation away from being an all-star and out of the league.
Right.
So it's kind of like that. Like you don't know what's going to happen, right? Your main player hurt and now you're the guy. And like, how do you respond to that? And if you're not ready mentally and physically, then, you know, it's hard to get in.
All right.
Tell me, what's your favorite part of coaching that team or just being around that team?
I think the consistency of it all. So Henry Marshall was our leader. Davion Ellis was a football guy, but I mean, just brought a light to the room. So I felt like every day I came into the gym, like I knew we were going to play hard. I knew we were going to have a good practice. You know, I knew that these guys knew, you know, what to expect from teams. Like everybody watched film. Everybody was pretty locked in. Mm-hmm. And so like going into a gym and just having that consistency every day was something I hadn't really been a part of, because it's always, you know, some kid going off the rail or some kid, you know, having their own agenda. And it really felt like everybody was there to win, you know, and when there's a goal at hand and you have 15 guys that know what they need to do, everybody's different. Like everyone's roles are different, but everything's being poured into, you know, winning and winning for each other. You know, that made it really special.
I agree. I say that too. You know, when you just go in a locker room and it's a winning team and a winning organization, you can tell all people care about is winning, and it's different. It's a different conversation. It's different talks. It's different mindset. It's different practices. It's different trips. It's different like time spent in a hotel. You know, just you can feel it, and that's great that you kind of mentioned that. That's how you feel it. You know, since we talk about winning, what do you think? Winning versus development. When does that come to play? What can you sacrifice and what don't? Especially in the high school level, where assumingly your best players want to play next level. Or how do you balance that?
Well, in high school, I just think everything's about winning at the end of the day. But you have to understand what team you have. So if you have a team that, you know, maybe their ceiling is just 500 or a little bit above, then you might go the developmental route if you have some younger guys that you know are going to play. And so, like, you may go into some games where, yeah, you want to believe that you're going to win, but you're outmatched. Like, you have to look at it as a development. You know, it's you're bringing players to the side and you're talking them through some reads or some actions that, like, we're doing on offense or another team's doing on defense. And you're walking them through that. You know, you're teaching them how to use their offhand or how to get their shot off faster, or, you know, you're just kind of teaching that stuff. And maybe it is shying away from winning a little bit because, again, you're playing a team that just won state. So it's going to be really hard to go in winning. But, you know, you do want to have that balance. Like, and then when you're in practice, you want to have a segment of game planning, but you got to have a segment where you're just doing form shooting, or where you're working on passing, or you're working on
like individual
skills. So, like, you have to make sure you're breaking up your practice like that. It can't only be game planning, because then you miss that development point for your younger guys.
So you kind of saying that depending on opponent or part of the season or the team, you kind of balance it out, development and winning, right?
Right.
When you feel like it's a winnable game and you're going for it versus, hey, this is might be a development game, right? So then
Right.
that's what you're saying.
Right. And so, for example, Bennett, it's every game is we need to win. We need to win because there's rankings, there's coaches, there's
Conference,
guys that need to play.
big, right.
And so usually your lineup in your rotation is shorter. So like 7 or 8 guys might be playing that game, right? And maybe if it's a blowout, then your starters don't play that much. And so you balance it like that, you know. So for us, we had a kid who was a freshman who was maybe 7th, 8th man off the bench, and maybe he'd go into the game and he wouldn't be playing well, so he'd be a quick sub. In those moments, I would talk to Mike and be like, "Hey, but long term, you know, his development matters. So even if he makes mistakes, he's got to be able to play through them." So you just balance that out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think one luxury we had at Carmel was having you as the sophomore coach. Like our first year, you had Ethan Matz as a freshman playing up, and you probably took some losses to get in the ball more and then like let him make the reads and game plays or whatever it was. But you let him grow, and then sophomore year he's up with us, and then obviously you being another assistant on varsity too, you had the relationship with him. We ended up starting your most games as a sophomore right away. So, but I know not every school has the luxury of having the sophomore team be, you know, strong.
Like a G League team for right. So again, like then it depends on a level too, right? Whether it's a freshman, really, who cares how many games they won if the player all he can do is just run plays and they're not getting better or they don't make good decisions, right? So one team who knows our plays will just blow it all up, right? So then like I guess it depends on level too. That depends.
I actually remember. So after my sophomore year, we saw how many kids came back for varsity, and it put it in perspective. Like, dang, should I have played this kid more because he ended up staying in our program longer? Because remember, there was probably maybe 4 kids.
We have football and other sports and just kind of got serious about stuff.
And so a lot of kids end up not playing their senior year, and like, should we have invested in other guys? You know, so you just
it's hard to tell.
I
wouldn't think about it too much. It's hard to predict, right? You never know, because the other kid came back later in the senior year and played, right? So hard to tell. Since we're talking about that, were you around at all sophomore and freshman this year?
Not really. So they practiced in the other gym at the same time. So I really stayed with varsity.
So it was the varsity and feeder, right?
Yeah. We brought up like 4 or 5 sophomores and freshmen.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of our guys actually end up playing JV off like varsity reserves. So they end up playing JV because they kind of changed sophomore into JV. So we had some juniors. We kind of treated JV as like a G League, you know, where they just got their reps and sit on the bench on varsity.
So we talk about the coaches too, like you mentioned Mike. Are there any coaches that influence your coaching style or the way you coach?
So there's a few. Coach Thrift, Brian Thrift, of course. He's at Bachelor's Christian. He just was big on little things. You know, he taught me how to handle. I had to do 2-ball dribble with 2-pound balls for my entire freshman year, and talk about, you know, tired shoulders and forearms and stuff. It was tough, but he really showed me little things. When he left, I had a super old coach. He was in the Hall of Fame now in Texas, Jan Jernberg. And he just taught me IQ of basketball. So he would talk for 30 minutes and I'd be so locked into what he was talking about because it was helping me think the game, you know, and he loved his mid-range
film or just
talking. Like he just would he just would talk. Like, I mean, after you get 65, like you just like hearing yourself speak. And so
did you draw something on the board sometime? No, just talking basketball.
Just in a circle.
Get in a circle. Talk about, you know, West Orange start. It's so funny. It is so funny. But I got my most IQ from him. And then I had this one coach in college. His name was Scott Campbell. And I don't think he liked me as much. Partially my fault because I was a butthole my last year. But he held our team accountable better than almost anybody I ever had as a coach. And I think he really elevated our Judson team. My final year, we ended up winning some games, and made the tournament, had a positive record in conference for the first time in, 10 plus years. And so, I really appreciated how he coached because I felt like we gained a identity and a mentality that we never have at Judson beforehand. So,
Gotcha.
those few guys.
What do you have any question?
Yeah, you go.
What would be, if you can be assistant to any coach anywhere in the world, country, who would you be assistant to?
Dimitri Pearson.
100%.
For sure. But I'd either want to be on a bench with Eric Spoelstra or Tyronn Lue because I feel like they have been able to do more with less.
Yeah.
I think Tyronn Lue's had a little bit more talent, but even the years where Kawhi's got hurt or PG got hurt, I feel like he still has his teams competing at a very high level. Eric Spoelstra too. Like he got undrafted, rookies to be playoff performers. Right. And I think that's, almost, if not all 100% mental, just being prepared, bringing the intensity that is needed for a playoff game in the NBA is, really
he
special.
really built that culture too. It's different. Everybody's saying it's different. And I don't know if you heard, in the preseason, they always go to Air Force in Florida and they give out knee pads, elbow pads, and like the mouth protectors before the camp. And some new players will be like, what is this for? I was like, oh, you will see. And that's how their basketball camp is.
Oh, they don't tell them what's about to happen?
Well, then, that you figure out real quick. Right. So it's a different culture. And now after Popovich retired, he's the longest coach in, I think, with 17 years.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, and then Tyronn Lue, actually, I was lucky enough before, like, all the synergies and stuff were big and stats. I had this big book from the playoffs from Cleveland Cavaliers, and he really likes those 4 high. Like, there's so many variation. I mean, like, there is 80 of them, like just a different variation, and that was pretty cool. And it was a scout reports for all the playoffs, and so I saw like the other side of Tyronn Lue because everybody's saying he's good with players. He had a great with player relationship. I mean, coaching LeBron takes something, from you. So in addition to that, he was great analytically, and before it was kind of cool,
Right.
Those are 2 good coaches that you mentioned. That's pretty good.
Those 3 good coaches. You being
that's right.
the main one.
That's right.
Oh, I forgot to spell Spoelstra. My bad. When was the last time you played?
Yesterday. I had so much fun. And playing with a mix of boys and girls that are very elite, it makes you appreciate like those moments, and I don't know if like they care as much as I do, but anytime you're an adult now and you get to play, every
time you finish the game, it's a good day.
Yeah, that's right. And so I just appreciate the moment, and I hope that one day they can appreciate it too.
Yeah. I suggest coaches all the time, play until you cannot no more. Who just can be players. And if you're not good enough, like play against 6th graders, they'll appreciate that. It's different. So
in the game yesterday, Steve had to stop the game because they're like, there's no way that Coach Jordan has the most energy and is talking the loudest and having the most fun when we got girls going high level Division I and senior boys that just finished their basketball careers playing against them and all this stuff. And Jordan's just out there just hooping, having fun, talking trash, having an energy, and it was just great to see.
Yeah, no, playing is fun. Describe your perfect basketball. What is it to you?
No dribbles. No, I was playing. So I like off-ball screens more than anything because it spaces the floor. As a defender, if somebody sets a screen away, I have to turn my head and I have to give attention to what's going on, behind me, around me, right? So I think, if there is some sort of off-ball action and then a 2 or 3 man game on the other side, you have the right amount of spacing. I'm also big on quick reads, right? So you have to be able to see what the defense is doing. If they help quick, it's got to be a quick, driving kick or a quick ball reversal. I'm a big fan of if you are standing at the top of the key, you have to reverse the basketball unless it's a catch and shoot three. Getting the ball from side
one
top side, it like shifting the defense. It's as a defender again, it's awful. Like I had a team, Holy Cross, and they used to just run a continuous motion. They didn't have plays. They would just do double screens away, curl cuts, fan cuts, flare screens, and it just was constant. And I would never be more tired than playing against them.
Is coming off them double screens and threes over and over again.
They were tough. Who was that little guard?
I'm trying to think of his name because he got benched as a senior.
I
can't remember his name.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I remember Boston Celtics had a stat that if you reverse the ball more than 2 times, so 3 and more, it's like 87% higher chance of scoring.
Wow. Yeah, and especially when you have elite players who can attack closeouts and break someone off the dribble. It's
definitely. What about defense? Like, what are your goals on defense? Did you have anything that you guys counted statistically? Maybe like deflection, kills. Because you guys, again, great. Zambada was great defensively, right? So you told us you're perfect because offense basketball, right? What is you want to allow 0 points, but like, how do you do that?
I'm a big fan of like single digit quarters. I think Billy McCormick kind of brought that to attention. Like if we can have 2 single digit quarters, you have a better chance of winning. We also want the whole teams under 40 points, so we'd be really upset if a team had like a 13-point quarter and, we just look at each other as coaches and be like, dang it, because it's just, you want your game plan to work all the time.
Right.
I'm big on ball pressure just because it takes teams out of their offense. I didn't switch a lot in college or high school. So like being introduced to like switching defense and how to teach that has been really fun. So I'm a fan of switching, but it can't be a lazy switch, right? It's got to be a hard switch up and under. You switch in, you're always moving your feet. So after you like perform the good switch, now you're locating the ball. You're in the right positioning, stuff like that. And then, a lot of teams when they have a big 7-footer, 6'10" guy, they just think that he's gonna get all the rebounds. And I do think that, having good guard rebounders, enhance your team a lot because then usually guards after a rebound can just push right away a little bit faster instead of a big rebound.
Making good decisions.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. You guys didn't tally anything besides single digit cores? Like, were you guys trying to get deflections? Or?
Oh, yeah. We did deflections, obviously steals. Other than that, not much, And then, like, obviously we just try to hold teams under 40 or under 20 at half. And, some games got ugly.
Right. Yeah. At Ignatius, we never really tallied anything. We were just trying to get defense rebounds, out rebounding everybody, but nothing like. I know there's a lot of teams, like when I was coaching in college, we really like tallied every single thing and like really thought that was what was going to win the games for us if we got these certain goals or whatever. And then at Ignatius, we're like, let's just play basketball and let's try.
Yeah.
I feel like too with more information now, you try not to over-inform kid because they say the kids nowadays are over-informed and under-coached. So then how do you find that balance? Because like you said, some teams, even with our scout report, remember at some point we just pulled it back because it was just too much. So how do you not over-inform kids with all the stats and all these things and just get them in a space where they're just playing basketball? How would you do that?
Maybe break it up. Like obviously you have some shooters. So now that they have their specific goals, you have some guys that are facilitators. So it's like assist the turnover, and so you can break it up that way. Like Coach
kind of player by player or positions?
Maybe positions or like just groups, like team goals. Maybe you get 12 deflections a game, under 12 turnovers. And so usually that was like the indicator of like your offense being ran well or was shutting them down defensively. Again, like you can't have 40 goals in a game because it will overwhelm kids, right? So it's just like three a game, right? If you're playing a team like Bennett, it's, can we like close the margin gap of rebounds, right? Can we limit them to 8 offensive rebounds instead of 20, and so maybe we'll give ourselves a
I
chance.
like it. So depending on the team, again, a matchup, you might have different goals. Team that press, you're like, hey, can we cut the turnovers under, right? Team that rebound well, should we beat them in rebounding battle, right? Team that crash, how many more possessions they have and so on. It's pretty good. What's the thing would stand out for you? Like, let's say you would do some tangible things, in addition to single digit quarter. Are there anything comes in mind that you would do?
Oh, definitely kills. I think it's hard to do. And so
Yeah.
if you get 3 stops in a row, and again, you can score on, at least one of those possessions, if not
Right.
2, I think that's just an easy attainable goal for a game.
How many kills per quarter or half or game would you do?
If you could get 2 a quarter, that'd be ideal. Again, hard to do, but there's a lot of possessions even in a high school game.
Oh, right.
Unless you're playing Notre Dame college prep, then maybe not. But
Ouch.
Slow that thing down.
and 23-19, and maybe not that many
Slow
possessions. That's right.
We did not try to slow down. So.
What else?
Anything else come in mind for kills is big? I know in college kills is big. What was your half?
We did 3 to 3 a half
Yeah.
at Trinity. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And it wasn't as difficult because we were trying to play like 200 possession games because we were just trying to play as fast as possible. But with the pressure we gave up some easy buckets too. So
Anything you study right now or try to learn? And
I'm trying to learn how guys like Luka and Shea create so much space. And so is it leverage? Is it hips? What part of their body are they working out on? Because, I want to teach, some of our guys who are slower, like how they can create space and still be effective. Because those guys, they don't play extremely fast.
Yeah.
They play at their own pace, but they somehow create so much space on a mid-range jump shot or a 3.
So they actually did the research, and James Harden and Luka are below average athletically, but their deceleration is in 99 percentile.
Oh, wow.
So their ability to stop on the dot is what creates space. So again, that's probably different exercises you should do, but deceleration is the thing that separates them. I don't know about Shea because it was a little bit few years ago, but that's one of the things. And a lot of players now, with a slow step, like we are trying to teach people how to actually play slow and decelerate and understand how to stop on a dot and explode. So you're changing speed versus just being fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you watch a lot of those guys?
Yeah, Luka's probably been my second favorite player, since he got into the league. Shea, as of recent, just his development has been crazy.
Yeah.
But I do just like how, and they're more offensive minded, especially Luka.
Yeah.
But I just love like how easy it is for him to run an offense because you either got to throw a double team and his passing's great, or you leave him on an island and, he's able to almost get whatever he wants. Again, he's not super athletic, but like his leverage, deceleration, his IQ in the game,
and all hand,
and he's strong. Like he weighs like 260. And so that's a big man for 6'7".
Sure. Do you think with that, like, what are new things maybe coming to basketball?
I don't know. What do you mean new things? Like new games or like
new, let's say, a 3-point shot increasing, and now because of the spacing, the post up is coming back a little bit. Like what do you think just from seeing development of basketball? Like, are there any new things coming in?
I would say definitely the slow step, just because I'm seeing let's say a little bit above average NBA players being able to just stop on a dime, like Denny Avdia. He's starting to come into his own, but like he's starting to figure out how to decelerate and use his body because he's like 6'8". I just think working on shooting as the first thing, you go into your development. I think everybody's just learning how to do. Bigs are playing outside and not posting up as much. even bigger guys are figuring out how to operate in the mid post more. And then like the build of teams, like you got to have a point guard, and now it's starting to look like you need a center. Like small ball was kind of becoming a thing, and I think it's now starting to be like you need a big, maybe even two bigs. Like the Memphis Grizzlies are trying two bigs because Jaren's more perimeter and Zach Edey's more in the paint, and so I think like teams are starting just to be creative with how they do things. What's also interesting about Memphis is they led the league in pace. So they had two bigs on the floor, but they ran the floor and they led the league in, I think, pace and scoring. So, interesting stuff like that. It's not only threes, even though right now we're watching the Celtics shoot 100 threes in 2 games. And I don't know if that's the answer. Like, I'm not a fan of that, but.
What do you think? So Boston, like you give example, they don't have a big, right? They like all wings technically from 1 to 5, and then OKC without Chet, they were like all wings, kind of like 1 to 5. So do you think teams just building teams differently, or you have more versatility because kind of bigger player now, more guards too? Like what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's just important that you have rim protection. So like a Chet is great, like a Brook Lopez, where they can shoot threes but also block shots. And so I think that's like your ideal big right now. It's also great to have a Jokic who can run your offense, but that's an anomaly. So I think with like OKC, it's like they have a bunch of like good wing defenders and they have a rim protector. So they don't just rely on a rim protector, they still play defense too, which is ideal. Boston having Porzingis, I mean, I wish he was healthy right now because I do think they're a different team, like with, that guy in the middle,
Well, just defensively,
Right.
I got you.
Is there a certain player's development that you've been coaching along the way that you take great pride in and then that kind of surprised you, or like the player's development, you didn't really see it right away, but they worked so hard and you kind of helped them, guide them on that journey? Is there any player?
Evan Salvador, probably one of my favorites, just because he was on our technically 3rd team when I started coaching. And I mean, he ended, my bad. Sorry. He was on our 1st team.
Got an email.
One of the teams.
But I didn't know who he was, but I just coached him so much. And every year he was on my team. And I mean, he went from, skinny shooter to like, he just developed an all around game. And watching him play his senior year, win some games without like their best player at Mundelein.
You mean Evan is the best player in Mundelein?
Yes. Yes. And it was just cool to watch him take down some good teams. Like I think they beat Stevenson this year too, without Derek, and it just like you saw the leadership and you saw the growth. Another kid is Ethan Matz, and it stunk that I wasn't able to get that Carmel job because I felt like I had the best connection with him and I could get the most out of him and his game, but having him as a freshman, he was very shy, playing up with sophomores. And then he ended up being a leader, he ended up like taking control of games. And, I call it a flow state where it's like you're one with basketball. And so there were a lot of games where he was always making the right read, always making the right play for his teammates, playing defense extremely hard. His length is crazy. And so it's just like those two guys were, pretty special to coach.
Yeah. The one more I would like to add is Mac Doyle. I talk to his mom all the time because I coach with her on staff, and she has nothing negative ever to say about you. She's like, yeah, Coach Jordan was the best coach that Mac could ever have. Like, it was all in his head, like always frustrated, like kind of hated the game. And then they moved over to full pack and they got you in there, like, and Coach Jordan was so hard on him, but just always like ended everything with a positive note. And then he was able to start on like the greatest Bennett team that's been there for like 5 years. And, he's not tall, he's not athletic. He's just something that like you pushed him to be something that he never thought he could be. So that'd be another player that's super proud that they had you as a coach.
I feel like you kind of mentioned too that all of those guys allowed you to coach them. and then coming back, circling back to build a relationship, with Matt. It took a while before he started responding, with Evan, it took a while. With Mac, it took a while. So tell about that. How do you bring the best out of the guys? Like we said, Evan was a different person and different player in 2 years he's been around. So how do you bring that out? What do you do?
So in like a horror movie, you have a comic relief where it's like 10 seconds of a movie where it's just like a funny joke or like a funny line or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need that with basketball. So you can't always like talk the game when you're in practice. You obviously want to be focused, but sometimes you got to just ask a kid how they're doing. Did they watch the game yesterday? Where'd they go to on vacation? Stuff like that. So it gives them a relief that you care about them personally too. I'm pretty sad I didn't mention Mac now, but
it's all good.
But Mac I don't know if I'll ever get a point guard like him again. Like I could go into games against like super athletic, 6'8" wings, and I knew that I would still get a fearless kid on the other side that was on my team. And I think that's hard to do because some kids will psych themselves out. And so when you see that, like we call it the glass eyes, where they kind of like it's a little over their head. I never really saw that from him that much. Like he would still try to fight. And then I realized that he would get 10 other guys to galvanize around him. And I think that's what you want in a leader, going in every game like you believe you're going to win.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he had a great career now. If a year ago you would say he would start for Bennett, who won the state,
it's crazy,
and be a contributor and stopping the best players from good games. Yeah, you wouldn't, oh, yeah, you're going to guard Jackson Davis in the championship game. There you go, man.
Gatorade Player of the Year,
right.
Mr. Basketball, Jackson Davis, and you're guarding him.
So that's, like we all think about it, but
we did.
Even us was unbelievable, right? Yeah, no. And then, so that's one of the best transformations for sure. And Evan, too. I mean, like you said, he was just a shooter, and then he became a really good defender, a physical finisher. And there are some games where he didn't make threes, but then he impacted the game on a different level, and then he that last summer ended up moving up, with Colin and Vince, and was a big contributor to him. So, there's a lot of kids. Honestly, Polo had a transformation.
Yes, he did.
I mean, Bryce Hoff was on that team too.
That whole team.
Right.
I think Bryce was close to quitting basketball too, where he was like, about it. And then he was having a lot of fun.
Right. And he had that dunk.
That's still crazy.
It's still there.
It's the only in-game dunk too.
I think it was the only dunk in his life. Like really? I think I don't know if he dunked in practice.
So, what do you think is a good coach? What it means to you? Because we always kind of, is it the guy who wins, develop relationship? What does that mean to you?
We had a conversation about Dan Hurley and if he was a good coach because he won back-to-back championships.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think winning is a part of it, or knowing how to win or get the best out of your players. But I think a good coach knows how to get his players to play hard for him. He knows how to build relationships with his players. So then he knows when a player's gonna have a bad day or emotionally he's not there, and how to get him out of that. Some players go through death in their family, or sickness in their family, and is that coach there for them? I don't think a lot of coaching has to do with what you write on the board. It's a part of it, but it's a small part. Coaching is a mentorship more than anything.
I agree. Did you have good coach? Like you mentioned, Thrift. Did you have good coaches in your life?
Yeah, I mentioned Coach Jan Jernberg. So it's interesting too because my dad had a stroke in 2014, and so that was a lot to manage. And I felt like Coach Thrift was there for me. In 2017, my senior year, his wife had the same stroke.
Wow.
And so that was actually my chance to be there for him. So me and my mom went to the hospital, to comfort him. But I only did that because of the time
how he treated you.
Yeah, right. And he invested in me a lot. Even only knowing me 1 year, I felt like he put a lot of energy that he had into making my senior year special.
Nice. Let's say kids start playing basketball today. What would your advice be to like a new generation of kids who just start playing basketball?
Don't put pressure on yourself. Like I get it, especially now with the transfer portal. It's like always a pressure to score, honestly, and it's nothing else but scoring. That's what coaches see. And I think what made it great for me when I was playing was that was the last thing I thought of. Like I only thought of the experience, and I only remember the experience, and so like that journey, you're never gonna get it back again. So like when you start playing, like don't think of anything else but the moment that you're playing, like make the right plays, like understand and build relationships with your teammates, and make that special. Because when you look back, like the coaches, it doesn't matter, the recruiting, it doesn't matter. It's really about your experience playing, because like that's what really does last forever.
So you just kind of use basketball as a tool of your journey, of your experience, really, right?
Yeah. And then, I mean, some people it's an escape, right? So like sometimes
for sure,
like you need to get out of the house, maybe home life is rough, or maybe school life is rough.
Yeah.
And so that's your escape of like, this is where I'm most comfortable. And where when I walk through these lines, there's nothing that follows me past those lines.
I realized that like a few years ago when somebody asked like, what is basketball to you? And I was like, that's what it was. When you step in the gym, everything just goes away. And it just like you, teammate, basketball, and sometimes there's no teammates. Sometimes just you and basketball on the rim, and it's an escape from everything, So like that's one of the things that I would think some kids, especially who have some problems in their life, they can put those problems away, You got anything?
Yeah. Basically, like what we go back to, what is a good coach? And I think it's always just the coach that's going to show up for you at your hardest moments. And that was, the coaches that you grew up that same experience. And that's why kind of mold you into the coach that you are today. So it's good to hear.
Yeah.
What about your advice to parents of the kids? What would it be?
So
I know we don't have that much time. But.
No, I love this. So I always brag on my mom because I don't think she sent a single email about playing time, about schedule, about whatever. Like she was involved because she was my principal. But when I played AAU, when I played basketball, like that was me. So it had nothing to do with her. She wanted to support. She wanted to ask how I was doing. But like anything that I had to do to talk to a coach about whatever, she stayed far away from it. And so parents don't have to do that now. Like obviously be involved, and if something's going on, like ask questions, but understand that it is the kid's journey, and you'll help them better for the future more if they can deal with their own problems and ask their own questions and honestly speak up for themselves. Because like the parents that control too much, then the kid, when they go to college, they are going to continue to ask you to send an email. Can you email? Can you email?
Yeah.
And it's, at the college level, coaches don't care. Like if
it's some
not,
starts earlier too, like depending on level too, like sponsored teams and
right.
So, but yeah, they learn hard the way.
Yeah, and so I believe that if you can just help the kid's journey and prepare the kid for the road, not prepare the road for the kid. Like that's probably one of my favorite quotes because like it just goes such a long way. And I felt like, dealing with hardship in high school and, my mom like being there, but also letting me figure it out, even though she was still there from a distance, helped a lot.
Right. Oh, I agree with that. And then it grows you as a person. It grows you love for that, because then if you have to figure out something, you gotta love it. Because at some point you just find something else that you really love more than that, and that shows. Because if your parents always driving you and bringing you and reaching out for you, then what are you doing? So like you just show up, and it's not enough, right? You want that love for the game. But yeah, I do like that phrase. You got any on that? So tell me more. Like you said, you prepared a guy, like a player for the road versus road for the player. I feel like nowadays too, and I just talked to Coach Walker about it, the growth of individual sport versus team sport, because you got all the information and sources and coaches and everything. You can get so much better in individual sports because of skill training and statistics and information versus team sports where the camaraderie, the other things are missing because of that. So I just had a conversation earlier today about, because he coaches golf, which is individual sport,
Right.
and basketball, which is team sport, and they go in different direction. How do we pull back the team sports again into the what it's all about versus, like that's where I want to go, and this team will help me to get there.
Mm-hmm. So I always tell players, when you're on offense and you're not getting your teammates involved, why do you expect them to play hard on defense if you're not going to involve them on offense? Right. And so when you're playing team sports, like, you got to think of the psychology of how others will react versus how you will react. So like when you're playing a individual sport, like, yeah, you can really just focus on yourself and your journey. But when you're playing a team sport, like, you have to make sure that the psychology of other players are at the same level as yours at least, and I think that's something that really bought me in the full package. That was one of your first like talks, is how important psychology is and how much there's a psychology in basketball. And then, everybody's personalities is different. So like having to manage that as a player is like, you don't really recognize it, but it's so important, because when you're going and trying to win games, like, it's always the best team wins, not the team with the best individual.
Yeah. I always kind of say that too, that, like PJ Tucker getting paid good money for being, per se, a leader and like staying in the corner ready for his shot. Right. So not everybody is like that, because people have goals too, to move. And some people, it's hard to buy in for that role on, let's say, travel AU team, right? In high school, it's a little bit different. Like we said, it's a community, it's camaraderie. It's a little shift, right? So how do you involve individual goals and still make the team to be about the team? Because you did a great job for, like, with select teams, per se, right? Who might not have great talent, but all the kids care about each other, and there was no selfishness. So what do you do usually? Maybe you can recite, like, do you build that camaraderie even though everybody have different goals?
I think you realize when it's someone's game. So like, let's say, Joe, who maybe had 8 straight single point games, 8 points, 6 points, whatever. And then he has one game where he hit 6 threes in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's, as a team, as a group, you realize he's hot. Let's try to get him the ball. Let's try to screen for him. And the thing is that when you have 9 guys that can all realize that, then it almost enhances the team, because then the defense shifts, or they might accidentally double like this guy, and now he ends up passing out of it, and it gives someone else an opportunity to make a play too. And so as far as like with individual goals, it's all, you can have individual goals and still push that, but you can't force it, And so I think a lot of kids will try to force it. Let's say I got to score 20 points this game. It's like, no, I have to be aggressive. So like, there's a different way of going about it, because you can attack off the dribble, get to the paint, but there's 3 guys there. You can't shoot, you probably don't want to. So, but your mindset's aggressive, but you're still making the right play. So you might have to change the verbiage that you have for your goal. It maybe
That's
not
really
as like
advice.
20 points, or it's not 8, it's not specific. There's another word for that, but it's, I'm going to have an aggressive mindset, but still make the right plays. I'm not just going to stop my man, but I'm going to make sure that I'm also helping out a teammate that might be a weaker defender. So like, you kind of just change like how you phrase your goal, still trying to attain the same goal.
Yeah. I have a theory. It's called end destination basketball. I believe that people who are in their end destination easier to buy in. And I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm a high school kid who don't play a lot. So for me, I'm not thinking about to go to college and play basketball. Then I can buy in for the program and system more versus the kid who have a Division I aspiration, right? So for them, their goal is kind of overpowering that, like junior college. Everybody in junior college wants to go. So it's different systems. So you got 10 guys who it's not end destination, like some walk-ons or practice player on Division I squads who just wave a towel will do everything for the program, versus the guys who want to go to NBA. They're not fully bought in because of that. So it's kind of like end destination basketball. If you're in your end destination, you can buy in much better for the bigger picture versus versus that. And that's why I feel like the teams with a more elite players or per se with more college prospects are harder to coach and manage because it's harder to buy in for the team stuff.
That's a good point. And that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So like, how do you balance it? But
Right.
we always tell kids though, like no coach Matt cares if you're losing by 30. So even if maybe you're not scoring much, but you're still impacting the game somehow,
Right.
That still matters, and that's, what we're trying to teach our kids, but it is hard to see it that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we always say like coaching 16U is way like more fun than coaching 17U, because as soon as you get that 17U, it's I need to go to college, I need to get my scholarship. That's where the most confusion comes into. But you guys had 2 great classes in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That was, they played 700 games together with the twins and David and them, and then that last group probably played just as many. It's just like trying to just keep focus on, you guys made this connection with this team. And then in high school, I think like if you have, instead of having like points per game goals, you say, hey, I want to make all conference. Well, the more people that want to make all conference, that means we have to win more games.
Right.
So what can all you 4 that want to make all conference, what can you guys do to help us win games so all 4 of you get there instead of just one person making all conference as well?
That's a good point too. But there are some like 17 now, like 17 select or all bought in because they don't have per se a high level college prospect.
Right.
And for them, it's natural. If somebody likes me and recruits me, great.
Right.
And they just want to have a really good varsity career
Right.
or journey, right? So then for them, it's different. And it took us a while, but then you can tell they bought in. It's, there's no this selfishness, aggressive line they walk in, right? They're very unselfish. So sometimes I have to pull out a little bit more out of them to be a little bit more selfish, right? Like say somebody got to do it, right? Like if we moving the ball, nobody shoots.
It's like playing with me, you, and DJ and Jordan. Nobody wants to score. We got Monte,
right?
too, doesn't want to score.
So we just all verge on running. But yeah, that's a good point. Again, I do think there's a little difference, at least with the travel basketball versus high school and high level travel basketball. Understand that and understand sacrifice. So, or just like depending on coaching too and coaching staff. And I feel like you say we're fortunate enough to have a great kids who will understand that.
Right.
Like we will not go for talent just because they're talented. We want right kids in our program who care about others. Same with coaches. Like since like we talk about advice and that, what are there any books you suggest to read for players or coaches?
Maybe for coaches, I've been reading a book. It's about strategic planning. I think it's what is strategic planning, and it's literally just you going through. Step 1 is obviously making your goals, but then a plan to like achieve those goals, and you break it down, and you break down the breakdown of those goals. You kind of get really in depth.
Do you know who wrote it by any chance?
Not off the top of my head, no. But what I've learned though is I can still like take that and then translate it to like coaching and basketball. So that's kind of how I started making my, coaching plan and proposal for like whatever head job that I'll apply for and get an interview. So I kind of translated that. So I think just strategic planning is good for when you're trying to build an elite roster, elite teams, a championship team. and in the same way, building a elite company, multi-million-dollar company, stuff like that. Because the book was for a business class.
Okay.
But I just used it for basketball purposes.
Gotcha. So it's not per se basketball book, right? Just build a planning and organizing, which you said you try to work on. So
yeah,
that's fair. Let's say, I would say like the higher level you go, the more mental game becomes. What do you do for that? Or what would you tell players to do for that? How do you approach and attack that?
It first starts with watching film. So if you want to be prepared for a game, like you got to see how the other team plays first, right? Who's the best player? What kind of plays like to run or their tendencies if things are going well or things aren't going well. So I think that's number one. And then two, it's watch film on yourself. So like, how'd you play against a high pressure team? How'd you play against a zone team? How'd you play against, just a tall, lengthy team? Or how'd you play against a small team? Right. So
just recognize patterns.
I think, because basketball is a game of patterns. It's a game of, adjustments. And it's a game of like similarities, because a lot of people do the same things. For example, if he's right-handed, he's probably going to want to go right more times than want to go left. It's just, and you kind of see like, the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Especially coaching AAU, you see like, you kind of know when a game's going to be a blowout, it's going to be a battle,
It's about anticipation. And
yeah.
What about mental part? Like, you kind of tell them about maybe how to play the game. What about mental? How to become more resilient or mentally tough? Because especially in our area, like north suburb of Chicago, we have a lot of, per se, not mentally tough kids because they've been living a good life with, less problems, and they're competing for, let's say, the scholarship with the kids who don't have plan B, right? So how do you become, or maybe as a coach, how to teach it, or maybe what's the suggestion to get them more resilient?
I think you have to call it out. Some kids aren't mentally tough, or they don't know how to. And so sometimes you got to teach some examples, like going through adversity. What is adversity, right? Like some kids don't even know what adversity is, or maybe they're going through adversity but don't know how to process it. So sometimes you have to call it out and just show them what it is, explain to them like how to go past that, right? Because it's a wall. There's a mental wall, and sometimes you're playing against a team that's better than you, but you can still compete. But it's how do you compete? It's even if you're going to get blown by, you still can pressure up. Trust that you have help. Even if he's taller than you, you can still box out. So like those things, like you can mentally prepare or focus on it. So right now I'm coaching a 16 select team, and their identity is we're going to talk trash and get in your head. And it's interesting because I didn't know that was the type of players they are. But once I figured that out, now you have that identity going to the games, and you almost think that you can win because like you're going to have that mental edge over somebody. So it's interesting, everybody's different, and it's hard to be mentally tough, but you have to understand how to lose or how to battle, but does your effort change in those moments?
Are there any exercise or, I don't know, breathing meditation that helps, or maybe some suggestion? Like you say, you kind of talk it out. Are there any action players can do that will help them to be that?
I always think long distance running is one of the most mentally challenging things for me.
Okay.
Let's say if you have to run 4 miles, the first mile feels pretty good. After a while, you kind of get tired and you start losing your running, not routine, but running stride. Your arms probably aren't as engaged. And so then in that, that's when you teach, keep pumping your arms, keep your stride up, because mentally you want to do what's comfortable after you get tired, and so we always talk about how stamina is a weapon. So like, what do you do after you're tired? Like, what are your tendencies after you're tired? And so I feel like you can build, how to stay mentally tough, through fatigue.
That's a good advice. Like they did a research that part of your brain like grows and lights up if you're doing things that you don't like to do. Right? Like, let's say you lift, but you don't like squat. When you do the squat, it it changes your brain wiring, in a good way, in being tough. Like you said, for you, it's a long distance running. Some people love that, like Ethan Petrillo would leave to run. But for you, it's like, it's challenging. You don't like it. So when you do exactly that, right? So I guess my suggestion to kind of jump on that, find something that you don't like. Like you don't like swimming, it's challenging. Do that, like take swimming class or go to the pool. You don't like cold showers, like do that, So find something that you don't like to do, because your brain grows and rewires to be tougher, to be more resilient. And, like you pointed out, that's pretty good. For most people, it's probably long distance running,
right?
But some people enjoy torturing themselves. So.
Yeah, the good saying that you always have too is like, don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself.
Yeah.
So in those moments that you're pushing yourself to doing something that you hate to do, your body's going to tell you like, hey, you're tired, stop doing this. Like, this is not. But if you talk to yourself like, hey, I'm getting better, like this is good for me, I'm enjoying this, or just lying to yourself, whatever you have to tell yourself to get through it, that's going to push you past it. And that kind of helps on the mentally tough stuff. Like, hey, we're not getting blown up by 30. Like, I'm going to keep pushing myself. Like, or hey, the coach is yelling at me because he's encouraging me, or he's better than me, not he doesn't like me, which most people would kind of turn to. It's I got to talk to myself and look at the positive side.
Yeah,
that's a good point. What do you most belong?
I guess in a place that, just cares about others first. I remember I played for an AAU team, and, the coach was just more worried about like collecting money more than about their players and about the team, and even though like he tried to act like that, I felt like I thrived most when, honestly, people looked out like for my back, because that's how I treat people. I always want to make sure that, they're taken care of, almost to a fault, where it's like I worry about how others are feeling in a moment and trying to make sure everyone's happy instead of, maybe
he would be a great girls coach. Why do you think was that? Why do you think that coach, like what stood out that you think that he was caring about money more than anything?
Well, when I stopped showing up to practice and I said I was done, obviously he was upset, but the first thing he asked was, how are you going to pay for the rest of the season? And I was like, well, I'm not playing in July, so it wasn't like, did you find a new program? I hope everything good. Like it was like strictly business. So, and I understand like it is business, but I at least
there's ways to do it.
Yeah. But like a place like Carmel, honestly, when I started substituting there, the teachers were really nice to me, and that honestly made me want to go back and sub more, because the kids really acted up. But then also the teachers, like not every teacher, but there were a good amount that would say hi, and the few that actually have a conversation with me. Like,
because you coach some of their kids. What was it? Was it president?
Oh yeah,
Cole.
We love Cole.
Bottom, Cole. Yes, but the Donners, Philip and Julie Donner, they anytime I see them in the hallway, they always, hi, how you doing? Things are going well.
Yeah.
And that was even before I coached their son Eddie. And Eddie ended up being one of my favorite players because he played hard, but they always made me feel welcome. So
that's interesting. Before you coach, or maybe even play, since you're still playing, what are things you're nervous about or worry about or like afraid? What's the most stand out?
Try not to get hurt.
As a player?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's mean you passed your peak, past your prime.
As a coach, coaching, I definitely I have a natural fear of losing, but I think it's healthy because that makes me want to give each team I coach my absolute best. I think I've always put a natural pressure on myself to win, because I felt like the kids deserve to win because they play hard, even though they may not be as good.
Right.
But other than that, I don't really get nervous about subbing, playing time, stuff like that. I feel like if you're playing well, you're in. If you're not playing well, you're sitting by me. If you don't follow instructions,
I feel like a lot of kids, like playing hard is prerequisite. a lot of kids like, oh, I play hard, I practice hard, so I'm gonna win every game. I mean, that's not true, because there's a way to do it. Like how hard do you practice and play? You don't know, right? And then how smart you doing?
Right.
Because if you like running on treadmill, you're not going anywhere. So you can say like, yeah, I just ran 5 miles, but you're in the same spot. So again, a lot of times, like you said, just playing hard it's not cutting it. So there's a lot of things to it. Do you ever nervous about maybe not calling timeout right time, or not giving all out, not pulling the best out of the players, or like is there any cross your mind, or when the game starts, it's just kind of you, like you said, you'll lose yourself in it?
I do try to stay in the moment for it. I do think that timeouts are hard to time because sometimes you have 3 timeouts or you have 2.5, or
Right.
so you got to make sure that you can save one for later. But sometimes
Yeah.
you save 3 timeouts, you never use them. Losing by 2. I think especially coaching like a high level team, it's am I doing my best to get this kid a college interest, right? And it sucks that it's like that, but I had one kid who wasn't playing great a couple weekends ago, but I was like, I got to keep him in because I need to do right by him.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to save a player from themselves. They're not playing well. Like you have to pull them out to let them get mentally focused again. The bench is so important because like that's your time to literally just breathe and think and process some things that happened before you came out, and then how to prepare yourself next time you go back in.
I agree. Yeah, like even 5, when 5 kids showed up, it's hard. You always want that 6th one just to get the mental focus and refocus and coach them when you pull them out. Yeah.
I always say kids think that they never want to come out until
yes, that's right. That's right.
5 players.
That is correct. I got it.
Yeah, we talked about film earlier. How do you do film, and do you think that do you like team film, or do you like doing film with individual players? Do you like players watching film on their own? What do you think the importance of film are, and what's your best strategy to have your players watch film?
So I think it's really important to first watch yourself, because you need to see that outward perspective of how you're playing, get a realization of who you are and what you're good at, what you're not good at. So that's one. I think it's important to watch film as a team, because sometimes you can just watch film on like another team and you got to scout together, but sometimes you can call out someone's mistakes in front of the team, and it almost is a way to hold a player accountable, and the team sees it. And so the team might be able to hold that player accountable too. Again, from like watching from outside of yourself. It's like watch yourself on TV.
Right.
And then I think it's important to maybe bring a player, like if I'm a coach and I'm bringing a player individually into a, locker room, classroom, wherever, to watch film. So then you can have a one-on-one film study from a kid who might be struggling, or asking why they're not playing as much or what they can do better. And then you can start picking that apart as well. I'm not a fan of the start-stop with film. Like sometimes I like watching, 3 or 4 minutes, just continuous, just kind of see the flow of the game. And then going back to my notes saying, hey, okay, let's go to this. Let's go to this. So like doing both of those, I think is really important, because I never really benefited from like start, stop, rewind, start, stop, rewind.
Just to rewatch.
Yeah. Even though there's importance to it, but
yeah, like clipping film like that is kind of like, okay, here's this moment, but you don't know what happened before the moment, or you don't know what the result after the moment was.
Like Bible verses.
Right. You just handpick what everyone's worked for you.
Exactly.
How did you guys do film at Vider this past year? Because, Carmel, we started like film, and then kind of fell off on doing film just because we saw there wasn't as big impact.
Yeah, the information wasn't retained. So it was just honestly a waste of most players' time.
Right.
I would rather go get, development on the floor versus that. So.
Which I agreed with, and I think every team's different.
Right.
I think this team was a lot of seniors, so then like they could retain information really well, and they could apply it from film to floor. Especially like a team like Notre Dame, who had, Brady Stellhorst, 6'7", 6'8". We had a scheme to like, play to his weaknesses. And I do think film worked because we knew where he would catch the ball and then where we could send a double or send extra help. if we had to front the post, we knew where the backside help would be. And so like things like that, how we organized film was we would practice and then after we'd go watch film. Sometimes we would start practice with film and then go to practice afterward and go straight into, defensive scheme, so I think both worked. One day we would do only defense and player clips. And then another day we would do, defense as in like watching a team's offense.
Right.
And then we would do how to attack their offense another day. So we wouldn't do both. So we'd break it up to where it made the focus on, okay, we're focusing on defense, focusing on offense.
Nice.
All right. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't?
You mentioned psychology a lot, just like psychology of yourself. Like what keeps you mentally tough? I feel like you're one of the most mentally tough people I know, as far as like you bring the same energy every day. There's not really days where you're not smiling or where you're pissed off, where you're just going to go at somebody else. Like you're pretty even keel. Like what developed you into having that consistency in your life?
I do have 4 kids. That helps. But I always said, you got to challenge yourself, like for lifting, for example. I believe that every man or every athlete should be lifting unless they're in pain and hurt. Like you have to challenge yourself mentally. I feel like you say, when we're traveling, I always sleep on the floor just to kind of reset myself. Just do like, where I came from. Like in college, I had a thin mattress on my floor. And I was just like, hey, I don't want to be here. I want to go where I want to go. So like it wasn't always comfortable. And that challenge every day, not eating, like fasting. I think I tell a lot of players or people, like, just do that. If you fast, it helps you to be mentally challenged. Because again, that's how people were wired. You hunt, you collect something, you eat, and then you might not eat for 2 days, before the refrigerating or anything. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're wired like this. So if you're not getting challenged, you just feel comfortable all the time. So you have to find things uncomfortable that you can, like you said, push through. Like for you, it's long running. Find the time to do that and challenge yourself, and it helps you. And then recently I found some like breathing technique with from like Army and Marines, and that helps to relax in under pressure situations, So just from that, there's a lot of books I start reading. I just start studying a lot because like I said, basketball is basketball, Like if you any kind of intelligent person, you can figure it out, X's and O and how to break 2-3 zone. There's just so much information now and then. So then how do you create more resilient, more grit, more just tougher, not just players, but people? Because, nowadays I feel like man is struggling, just in the new world. Like people quit on people cancel people. So how do you not do that? How do you resilient enough to go through that and come back with a victory, and how not to give up. So I feel like that just kind of took a turn from basketball more. And for us, basketball is a tool, as a coaches, like that's a tool. Like really most players might have 8-year career, but they have a whole life ahead of them, like that's, if you're lucky, you can play college basketball, but the rest, like how do you become a better person? How do you build your character? How do you understand other people? How to care about others? Like you said, you're great at that naturally, right? But some people just like, oh, I just show up, I coach, we're good, we won this certain game, and then boom, I'm out, So then like next day, oh, I show up, we had this good strategy. So like, if that's what it's all about, then it's not fulfilling, So that's what would be my suggestion to players. That's why we do strength stuff all the time. No matter how good bad players are, how good bad team is, how tired, not tired they are, I'm a big believer of like, our strength part of practices. It challenges you. So now, like, what do you do next after that?
Thanks.
All right. So, we have a tradition of the people before you left your question, and then we'll ask you to ask the question for the next guest. So the question was from Jim Russo: if tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, is there any sound?
Oh, there is a sound, but it just we don't. Well, I mean, we don't hear it. The sound still happens though. God hears it.
All right, that's good. What your question would be to the next guest without knowing who it is?
Ooh, so if there was any part in the Bible you would want to go to, or maybe not in the Bible, just history, where would you want to put yourself?
Time-wise or
Yeah,
just anywhere?
time-wise, like plop yourself in the 16th century.
Gotcha.
Plop yourself with,
Location too, or
the
just
Apache Indians,
All right.
and live life or something.
All right.
Just something where like that,
time and location.
Yes, time and location, and because so I've been watching Game of Thrones, and it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but it's been so interesting because it's like it's really survival of the fittest. Like you woke up every day like I might die today, and we don't have that same mindset. But I mean, back in those times, it was natural.
It's part of the life.
Yeah. So.
All right. I'll pass it on. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Pleasure.